The next Ukraine thread just dropped, and it is a doozy. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Yesterday, as he promised, Dom Luker, the breaker of narratives, dropped his long thread concerning Ukraine and its seeming obsession with the symbolism of National Socialism. But the problem goes beyond symbolism. It includes actual sympathies and policies that recall those of Germany during the Second World War. Furthermore, this thread ties together the most dire accusations against the regime now in control in Kiev, or Kiev. They include certain allegations you have heard me talk about before, including repurposed Soviet biological weapons development laboratories under NATO and American direction. The thread also contains embedded photographs and videos showing a pattern of racism, even in the armed forces of Ukraine, that according to the influencer, simply does not exist in the United States military, nor does it exist to the degree shown in the United States civilian life. Now, is he telling the truth? Well, after I share his description of his thread with you, you can decide that. And I must ask my fellow Americans to decide a great deal more. Before I get into it, I do want to shout out to the prime sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views. Link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom for that link. Lots of great merchandise there, especially this t-shirt that I've chosen for today, which reads, 1984 was not an instruction manual. Again, we deal here not with censorship, but with propaganda and the sale of the concept of perpetual warfare. The message to which Dom Luker and I stand opposed amounts to, and I quote, "We have always been at war with East Asia." Or rather, if I may paraphrase, we have always been at war with Russia. I have already at least hinted to you that the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was a different country from the Russian Federation or even the Russian Empire. Maybe someday I'll treat that history in detail. One more thing. If you like what you're about to hear, you can like this video. You can also click the bell icon to get a notice every time I come out with a new one. In fact, you see the new icon, the heart shape with the US dollar sign in it? That's the super thanks icon. If you really want to keep these videos coming, click that and leave me a tip. Any currency will do, so long as it's legal tender. Now, Dom Luker dropped previews of his thread on Sunday evening, March 12th. I talked about that on Monday morning, and at least 300 of you have seen it. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Luker did have to delete one of his tweets after someone pointed out that the venue of an embedded video had a name different from the one he used. But the reaction to his previews brought out an element on Twitter that I had never seen before. A certain organization has formed, calling itself North Atlantic Fellas Organization, or NAFO. Why this organization chose a nickname from the English word fellow, they didn't explain. Nor should anyone confuse them with the National Alliance of Forest Owners or the Northwest Atlantic Fisheries Organization. And to make sure you don't confuse them, I've left a link in the description to the homepage of the organization I'm talking about. They have an online merchandise store to support their operations. They say they're raising money for the frontline defenders of Ukraine. Most of all, they produce propaganda against Russia and for the current NATO effort in Ukraine. NAFO has appeared on Twitter with a hashtag based on their initials. They deny any negative assertion about Ukraine, claiming all of it is Russian propaganda and that conspiracy theorists promote it. But the problem with calling anything a conspiracy theory today is that those of us who recognize conspiracies have lately found and shared proof. For myself, I observe the Fleming rule, which Ian Fleming articulated in his novel Goldfinger. You've heard me quote it often enough, and now I will quote it again. Once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, and the third time it's enemy action. With that in mind, we come to the thread. 25 tweets. And as usual with Dom Luker, the anchor tweet has ironic text stating the opposite of what he seeks to show. I've left links in the description to the odd numbers, which is now how I intend to show threads of this kind. So, here goes. Thread: proof that you are a National Socialist if you don't stand with Ukraine. Ha ha. On February 7th, 2023, One America News researched the claims of biolabs named Metabiota in Ukraine and the possibility that they were a reason that Russia decided to attack Ukraine. OAN was able to verify and link Joe and Hunter Biden to these claims. And for proof, he offers an embedded video segment of the OAN program and a thread by another influencer dating back to December 17, 2021, laying out the Metabiota and Hunter Biden connection. Metabiota produces bioagents under diplomatic cover at secret labs, then sells pandemic insurance and trackers to help countries get ahead of what they're putting out. Aside, if this reminds you of a classic protection racket, it should. The company is part of Pentagon's DRTA program, as well as funded by Rosemont Seneca, connected to Hunter Biden. Quote, Hunter Biden and his colleagues invested $500,000 in Metabiota through their firm, Rosemont Seneca Technology. He helped secure millions of dollars of funding for Pentagon contractor Metabiota, specializing in research on pandemic diseases that could be used as bioweapons, unquote Twitter user Tino Bambino. On May 17, 2022, the Russian Ministry of Defense presented possible evidence that the U.S. is developing biological weapons in Ukraine. Russia claimed that Ukrainian scientists identified as 6 families of viruses, including, drum roll please, the virus that shall remain nameless. This continues with a link to Creative Destruction Media's report titled Biden-Ukraine Timeline. On February 28, 2022, Russian economist Valentin Katasanov says America besieged Russia by placing biolabs in surrounding countries. The goal of Russia's operations in Ukraine is to eliminate these labs. It comes with an embedded video link from the Middle East Media Research Institute. Let's go back in time. On November 24, 2004, Secretary of State Colin L. Powell said Wednesday that the voting in Ukraine's presidential election was riddled with fraud and that the United States could not accept a victory by Viktor F. Yanukovych as legitimate. On February 4, 2015, an article from left-leaning The Guardian announced Ukraine as the most corrupt nation in Europe. It is worth noting that this is after 3 elections that were riddled with claims of fraud among 4 elections by 2015. Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index of 2019 made Ukraine 120th out of 185 countries, thus making it the 2nd most corrupt country in Europe. A Freedom House survey from the same year assessed the level of corruption in Ukraine as only slightly better. On February 24th, 2023, Western media and politicians spoke about the anniversary of the conflict in Ukraine, which in reality is not the case. The conflict in Ukraine started in 2014, when Ukraine launched bombs against civilians in the People's Republics of Donetsk and Lugansk. On June 2nd, 2014, Ukrainian aircraft struck the center of Lugansk, killing 8 people and badly wounding 28 more. This is how the Ukrainian conflict started in Lugansk. The battle for Donetsk began on May 26, 2014, when Ukrainian troops destroyed the city's airport. For 8 years, Ukrainians have lived with hostility and conflict while the West stood idly by. According to the UN, more than 14,000 have died in the Russia-Ukraine war, 3,000 of them civilians. This is an active war that has continued unabated while everyone was unbothered. On March 2nd, 2022, Vasily Nevencia, Russia's ambassador to the UN, criticized other countries, including the U.S., for failing to condemn the 2014 overthrow of Viktor Yanukovych, the pro-Russian Ukrainian president who was ousted by Ukraine's government after months of protests. On July 6, 2022, MR Online published an article that lists a timeline of events where the CIA not only infiltrated Ukraine but also influenced their political structure and led to an increased NATO alliance. Carbon copy to big fella Adam Kinzinger. Yes, that Adam Kinzinger. The title of the article, Anatomy of a Coup. On July 29, 2022, Sky News Australia covered the Ukrainian civil war that began in 2015. They also spoke on some of the many war crimes that Zelensky has committed, their National Socialist ties, and how the United States has been provoking Russia with Ukraine. I support the people of Ukraine, emphasis his, and he means as opposed to their government. On April 30th, 2014, The Guardian claimed that Russia was not to blame for the Ukrainian war, but an attempt to rally Kiev behind Western nations, quote, by ousting an elected leader made conflict certain, close quote. If Ukraine had nothing to hide, why would media transparency vanish? After Volodymyr Zelensky won the 2019 Ukrainian presidential election, many Ukrainians were in disbelief due to his staggering 73.22% win in the second round. They initially took his election as a joke. Zelensky was known for being an actor and a comedian, not a politician. Now here, he embeds a video that purports to show Zelensky borrowing 2 fully automatic handguns. They look like Uzis, but I'm not expert enough to be sure about that. What he proceeds to do next, I'll let you imagine. I think that this is probably a pretend, but click through to the video if you must, but take care to take to heart the usual suggestion about parental judgment and discretion. In the last of his tweets, Don Luker shares more about National Socialist symbolism, civilian casualties, and documented incidents of official racism. And yes, I said official. Before I share these details, I want to shout out to a sponsor who can really help you through the economic storms to come. That sponsor is oursilverlines.com. Do you feel like you're working harder for your money just to get by? You are not alone. The fluctuating economy, employment issues, and unexpected changes in life have left many families struggling over the past few years. Collecting gold and silver can help shield you against many of these challenges. But if you're like me many years ago, you don't know where or how to start. Our Silverlines helps by connecting you with thousands of members who are learning the secrets to creating and protecting true wealth by collecting precious metals. Whether you just want to collect rare and unique coins or take advantage of the business opportunities this company provides, either way, they can help you learn to live an exceptional life. Visit oursilverlines.com to learn how you can build a legacy for your future. And now, as I said, he goes on to talk about the apparent pervasiveness of National Socialistic type symbolism. On January 8, 2021, a Time magazine journalist went to Ukraine to investigate the Azov Assault Brigade, a Ukrainian National Socialist-style battalion within their armed forces. Time not only verified these allegations, but they also recorded them. It has been reported that the Azov is now 3 times its size now, which is why I think Don Luker once called it the Azov Regiment. President Putin has claimed that he ordered the invasion of Ukraine to denazify the government, while the same media outlets that verified National Socialist existence in Ukraine are now calling Putin's claim propaganda. Let your eyes judge for you. Now then he says in all caps, we don't support weak Putin either. I'll get to that. I'll talk more about that later. The citizens of the world are being given a false view of the war in Ukraine. I don't support Putin for the same reason I don't support Zelensky. They're dictators that don't support free speech and freedom. Here are just a few of the civilians killed by the Zelensky regime. And here he shares 4 photographs of pictures on a wall, names on a wall, and quite a few pictures showing apparent civilians who have just died violently. Again, click at your own risk and exercise parental judgment and discretion. February 2022. Yevhen Karas, the leader of Ukraine's neo-national socialist terror gang, the C-14, says Ukraine is being armed as pawns of the West because, quote, we have fun killing, we have started wars, we have the most javelins in Europe, in the European continent. Maidan would have been a pride parade if not for National Socialist influence. Now, in case you missed the significance, you have just heard someone boasting of having a hand in the Maidan Revolution of 2014. On October 12th, 2019, world star hip-hop released a video of a black man being forced to eat a banana at a Ukrainian supermarket while they called him a monkey. Well, there you go. How that meme got started about bananas being the favorite snack for primates, I'll never know. But it has also been a particularly vile display of racism to say or imply that blacks are primates just because they originated in Africa. But if they'd read their Bible, and especially Genesis, they'd have to admit that this is simply not true, and could not be true. Then that there is really only one race, the human race. Dom Luker then continues. Ukraine claims that there is racism everywhere, but this is not happening in America or our military. Carbon copy user Malachi MMP. On February 27, 2022, attorney Ben Crump, the lawyer that represented George Floyd and his family, revealed that a black 2-month-old baby and hundreds of black refugees were refused access to the Ukraine-Poland border. Americans are universally against racism. This cannot be ignored. It would cost the U.S. $5.6 billion to build a border wall, not the $11 billion that Democrats suggested. Democrats said we did not have the funds to build a wall that would have addressed our real pandemic, opioid overdoses. But we gave Ukraine more than half of their $200.9 billion gross domestic product at $113 billion. CC a user named Alex. Ukraine states that America has a National Socialist problem, but you won't find one photo or article linking any National Socialist party to an American military unit. That is the difference between their lies and our truths. We don't have a National Socialist problem. Ukraine does. Donate to journalism, and here the thread ends with a suggested donation link. The reaction seems to be equal parts you said it and you're lying. I have links in the description to a total of 10 tweets showing various reactions. One user early on suggested that Dom Luker had touched a nerve and that the bots were out in full force. That user might have been replying indirectly to another tweet that actually compared it to, and I quote, a homeless guy reaching you on the street and mumbling one nonsense after another. As usual, argumentum ad hominem is one of the last refuge of those who have already lost the debate. Another user pointed out that charity begins at home. Of course, he says, every Western voter needs to know what his country is supporting and demand that their governments stop that support. Then he asks people to imagine how much help these same government could afford to the homeless or the needy. Instead, still another user pointed out a very ironic thing, namely that Western media, before February 2022, regularly showed those National Socialist and related symbols. But after Russia began its special military operation, it was all "Go Ukraine!" and not one mention of those symbols. This user illustrates that with a very impressive collage. Here's another irony. Another account trying to negate the thread revealed that the Anti-Defamation League has taken Ukraine's side. The ADL is asking why Putin is calling the Ukrainian government a bunch of National Socialists. Well, hey, I am not at all sure that revealing that association was wise from the pro-Ukraine point of view. I wouldn't trust the Anti-Defamation League to report anything truthful, and why they are even sticking their noses into this, I'm still waiting for them to explain. Another user speaks directly to the NAFO Association. His message is a little off color, but on point. The messages in opposition, and yes, they exist, mainly consist of saying that Dom Luker is lying. I saw one user speaking to the bioweapons development allegation with a curious bit of tu quoque. Specifically, he says all countries have biolabs. Well, we are talking about biological weapons development laboratories. Or didn't that user read the thread? Well, I'd say Dom Luker answered virtually every point he made in his thread. But the NAFO contingent definitely came out in force. One of the tweets I have shows a man with a cartoonish dog face. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That dog face is the exact same face as the NAFO mascot in their merchandise store. That trick is as transparent as glass. Apparently, Volodymyr Zelensky wasn't always ready to make war on ethnic Russians. Another user pointed that out by sharing video of Zelensky specifically urging the Ukrainian government to leave the Donbass and Crimea alone and let its residents, the overwhelming bulk of whom are ethnic Russians, who have lived there since at least Soviet days or going back further, speak Russian if they wanted to. Not so today. And last, of all the parody retouches anyone could furnish to illustrate just what sort of deception certain people in authority have perpetrated on the American people, the last reaction tweet I have stands out. It embeds a picture of a Marvel Comics universe superhero, specifically Captain America, except that it's retouched with Volodymyr Zelensky's head, the Ukrainian stylized bird on his chest, a sunflower instead of a star on his shield, and at the bottom, the legend, Captain National Socialist, the Great American Heist, meaning, of course, copyright violation. And now, my analysis. This thread clearly establishes many of the things I have already covered, including about bioweapons development laboratories and Hunter Biden's association with same. But it also reveals that Ukraine has a serious problem with racism and ideologies they borrowed from World War II Germany. Mr. Lucas said only one thing with which I would have to disagree, that he cannot support Vladimir Putin. Now, is Putin a dictator? Well, some might call him that, because his government doesn't seem to have the checks and balances system of the U.S. government. But I put it to Mr. Luca that we can trust very little that comes out of Russia, perhaps for precisely that reason. Now that goes also for lurid tales of what happens to Putin's opponents in or out of government. I would also have all my friends consider this. No totalitarian urges his people to arm themselves as individuals to repel an invasion. But Putin did in 2015. And he took that same occasion to tell Americans not to give up their guns. Of course, Russia has its share of modern dissidents who can rely on American legacy media to air their causes. For that matter, Russia has no tradition of liberal democracy, or even a republic as I would understand the term, nor any history of same. Russians went from oligarchy in support of a hereditary nominal monarch, which all monarchies are, to an oligarchy of party faithful acting as the hand inside a glove that looked like a representative government, but certainly was not. And from there it went to its present system. Russia has never, I repeat, never been a constitutional republic. Having said that, I observed that most of the complaints by Russian dissidents echo those by the American political left against President Donald J. Trump. Furthermore, Putin has criticized American society for supporting lifestyle choices that can only lead to depopulation if the wider population were to adopt them wholesale. Those policies have also made America weaker and far less able to project power abroad. The opposition to this thread comes from a predictable quarter. NAFO, of course, you can find their hallmarks easily in some of their replies, but mainly it comes from those who do not want to see the rise of civilizational states, self-sufficient entities that reject one world government and one-size-fits-all ideas of government. Russia is the first of these. Vladimir Putin has said so, up front, and I believe him. And as I've often said, I think America should also become a civilizational state. We can and should remain a constitutional republic, a thing Russia is not, and I don't expect Russia ever to become one. But we should still become a civilizational state and knock off this silly ambition of transforming ourselves into some kind of capital district of a one-world federation. Apologies to Suzanne Collins of Hunger Games fame. And I especially can have no brief for a supposed country, the government of which might indeed be nothing but a cadre of adherents to a bankrupt ideology and willing to host a staff of Doctors Frankenstein, with apologies to Mary Shelley, cooking up God knows what in their laboratories. Links to the description of the article, to the NAFO homepage, to the thread, to 10 tweets in reaction, to my Declarations of Truth Twitter account, and to Conservative News and Views. I've also left links to the awesome CNAV Store and to oursilverlines.com, as I also mentioned. You know already about how to like a video, turn on notifications, and leave a tip. On the end screen, I'm going to leave a subscribe link to my channel and links to the Ukraine playlist, my explanation of what a civilizational state is, and my Russiagate Lies video that I'll borrow from the Twitter files. This is Terry A. Hroba delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you to let the truth set you free.